The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the small, unassuming house that had been David's sanctuary for the last 20 years. He stood in the kitchen, the scent of garlic and rosemary wafting through the air, memories of family dinners flooding his mind. It was supposed to be just another evening, a quiet gathering with his daughter and her husband, but a sense of unease clung to him like a heavy fog. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. David, a soft-spoken retired schoolteacher, had always been the quiet one in the family. Overlooked, underestimated. His wisdom often dismissed as mere rambling by those who couldn't see beyond his gentle demeanor. At 62, he had learned the fine art of observation. He watched as his daughter, Lisa, moved about the kitchen, her laughter brightening the room, unaware that her husband, Marcus, looked at her the way a wolf might eye a sheep. David could see the glint in Marcus's eyes, a flicker of something sinister that sent a chill down his spine. "Dinner's almost ready," Lisa called out, her voice cheerful, a stark contrast to the tension that hung in the air. David forced a smile, but his mind raced with questions. He had always trusted Marcus. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed to genuinely care for Lisa. But lately, the man's financial troubles had become more apparent. Whispered conversations behind closed doors, the burden of debt weighing heavily on his shoulders. David had heard enough from Lisa to know that things were not right. As they gathered around the table, the clinking of cutlery echoed in the silence. David noticed how Marcus's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the wine. It was a subtle detail, but it spoke volumes. Why was he so on edge? They toasted to family, to good health, but David felt the weight of the glass in his hand. The cool surface a reminder of the betrayal that lingered just beneath the surface. "Cheers," Marcus said, his voice too loud, too forced. David met his gaze, and for a brief moment, the world around them faded. It was as if time stood still, and in that fleeting moment, David saw through the mask of civility. The man before him was not who he pretended to be. David felt a rush of anger mixed with sadness. How could someone he had welcomed into his family turn so dark? As the evening wore on, David's unease grew. He excused himself to the bathroom, needing a moment to breathe. Standing before the mirror, he scrutinized his reflection. The lines etched into his face told stories of pain and resilience. He was a man who had fought battles, who had seen loss and heartache, yet he remained steadfast. It was in this moment of solitude that a thought struck him like lightning. What if Marcus had ulterior motives? What if this evening, this gathering, was not just about family but about something much darker? He stepped back into the dining room, his heart racing. The dining table was adorned with the remnants of their meal, the atmosphere thick with unspoken tension. As they finished their wine, David's instincts kicked in. He noticed Marcus's eyes darting toward the kitchen, as if waiting for something to happen. A flood of memories surged within him. Stories of betrayal, greed, and desperation. He had seen the depths of human depravity in his years as a teacher, the lengths to which people would go when cornered. "David, would you like some more wine?" Lisa asked, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around them. "No, thank you. I think I'll just have some water," he replied, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. He reached for the pitcher, pouring himself a glass, and in that moment he made a choice that would alter the course of their lives. As he poured, he glanced at the two glasses in front of Marcus. They sparkled in the dim light, the crimson liquid swirling within them like a dark secret. David's heart pounded as he recalled a conversation he had overheard weeks earlier. Marcus discussing a financial arrangement with someone whose name he didn't catch. It had sounded ominous, laced with an urgency that sent shivers down David's spine. He had dismissed it at first, thinking it was just idle talk. But now, as he stood there, everything fell into place. With a steady hand, David switched the cups, placing the untouched glass in front of Marcus, while he returned the other to its original spot. It was a small act, but one that carried the weight of centuries of wisdom, a silent declaration that he would not be a victim. "Everything okay?" Lisa's voice broke through his thoughts, concern etched on her face. "Just fine," David replied, his voice calm, betraying none of the turmoil within. He watched as Marcus raised the glass to his lips, oblivious to the switch that had just occurred, believing himself to be the master of the game. But David knew better. He had played this game before, and he was ready to teach Marcus a lesson he would never forget. As the tension thickened in the air, David felt a sense of resolve wash over him. Tonight was just the beginning. In the darkness of the kitchen, as the shadows danced against the walls, David's mind raced with thoughts of vengeance and justice. He could feel the weight of the world pressing down on him, but within that heaviness was a spark of hope, a flicker of the man he had always been beneath the surface. He would not allow himself to be poisoned, not now, not ever. He returned to the table, a quiet storm brewing within him, ready to face the consequences of his actions. In that moment, he transformed from the overlooked father to a force to be reckoned with, a protector of his family, even if it meant stepping into the darkness himself. The evening stretched before him like a long, winding road, where every choice would lead him closer to a reckoning. The true battle had just begun. The clinking of silverware against porcelain filled the air, a symphony of mundane sounds that David had always found comforting. Yet tonight, the melody felt discordant, each note a reminder of the heaviness that loomed over the table like dark storm clouds, threatening to burst at any moment. He sat rigidly at his place, his gaze flickering between Lisa's bright smile and Marcus's, which seemed to stretch a little too wide, a mask barely concealing something sinister lurking beneath. As the golden light from the overhead chandelier flickered, casting wavering shadows across the dining room, David felt a weight settle in his chest. He had taken a bold step in switching the cups, but now, as he watched Marcus raise the wine glass to his lips, his heart raced with a mix of dread and anticipation. It was an act of defiance, a small rebellion against the gnawing fear that had taken root in his mind. "David, you're awfully quiet tonight. Is everything all right?" Lisa's voice broke through his thoughts, light and melodic, yet laced with concern. She looked at him, her brow furrowing slightly, and he forced a smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm just enjoying the evening, sweetheart," he replied, his tone gentle yet firm. He glanced at Marcus, whose eyes shone with a predatory glint, and he felt a shiver run down his spine. "The food is excellent, as always." "Of course, it's my recipe." Lisa beamed, her enthusiasm a stark contrast to the tension that crackled in the air like static. "I'm glad you're enjoying it, Dad." Marcus chuckled, the sound grating against David's nerves. "You know, David, they say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Lisa must have a firm grip on yours." He raised his glass. The deep red liquid swirled inside like a warning, a beckoning to the abyss. David's stomach churned as he fought to keep his composure. "Only the best cooks can win a heart," he countered lightly, though the words felt heavy on his tongue. He could feel the tightrope of civility stretching taut, each word a careful step towards an inevitable confrontation. "Speaking of hearts," Marcus continued, his tone shifting, a predatory glint in his eyes, "I've been meaning to discuss some investments. You know, things aren't looking too bright for me right now. I could use an ally, a partner." The air thickened with tension. David's pulse quickened at the insinuation, the implications swirling around in his mind like a tempest. "Investments?" he echoed, the word tasting bitter in his mouth. "You mean the same ones you've been losing money on?" Marcus's smile faltered for just a moment, a flicker of something dark crossing his features before he recovered. "Sometimes you have to take risks, David. That's how fortunes are made or lost. But I think with your wisdom and experience, we could turn things around." Lisa, oblivious to the underlying hostility, leaned forward with interest. "Oh, Dad, maybe you could help Marcus. You've always been good with numbers and planning. Lisa, dear, David interjected gently, I don't think this is the right time to mix business with family. His heart raced as he met Marcus's gaze, a silent challenge passing between them. David felt the weight of the earlier choice settle heavily on his shoulders. He had taken a risk, but was it enough to protect his daughter? Why not? Marcus shot back, his voice suddenly sharp, cutting through the air. You're retired, after all. What better way to spend your time than by helping your son-in-law? The term twisted in David's gut. Son-in-law. There was an intimacy in the title that felt irrevocably tainted by Marcus's greed. I prefer to spend my time enjoying the company of my family, David replied, his voice steady as he fought to maintain control. Family, huh? Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Seems to me that some family members are more willing to help than others. The subtle accusation hung in the air like a heavy fog, suffocating the conversation. David felt his hands clench under the table, the warmth of his own fury rising to the surface. I'm sure you'll find your way, Marcus, but the road you're on is not one I wish to join. The silence that followed was thick, a palpable tension that seemed to vibrate in the air. Lisa's smile faltered, her eyes darting between the two men as she sensed the rift widening. Let's not ruin dinner with talk of business, she suggested, her voice strained yet hopeful. How about we focus on the meal? It's my favorite dish. Marcus's expression softened, but the menace in his eyes lingered, a reminder that beneath the charming facade lay a schemer with darker ambitions. You're right, Lisa. It's just that I'm under a lot of pressure. It's hard to keep my mind off things when I'm trying to make sure we're all taken care of. David's stomach twisted at the implication, the subtle threat that hovered just beneath the surface. I understand pressure, he replied, his voice steady yet cold. But taking advantage of family is not the way to relieve it. David, please, Lisa interjected, her voice rising slightly in desperation. Let's not start arguing. We're supposed to be celebrating tonight, not bickering. David softened at his daughter's distress, his heart clenching at the thought of her feeling caught in the middle of their turmoil. You're right, Lisa. I apologize, he said, forcing a nod toward Marcus. Marcus shrugged, his grin returning though it didn't quite reach his eyes. No harm done. Just a little misunderstanding. Right? Right? David replied, but the word felt hollow, echoing in the vast chasm that had opened between them. As the evening wore on, the conversation drifted towards lighter topics, but David found himself withdrawing, his mind racing with thoughts of how to protect Lisa. Each forced laugh and polite smile felt like a mask slipping on and off, and he could sense the danger simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to strike. After dinner, as Lisa cleared the table, David lingered in the kitchen, his gaze fixed on Marcus, who poured himself a second glass of wine. The way Marcus lifted the glass, a glint of malice in his eyes, sent a shiver down David's spine. We should talk about this later, David, Marcus said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. You can't just turn your back on family. Family shouldn't turn on each other either, David replied, his voice steady as he stood his ground. I will not be a pawn in your game, Marcus. A tense silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken threats and hidden meanings. Then, as if sensing the shift in the atmosphere, Marcus raised his glass, a mock toast. To family, he said, a smirk tugging at his lips. David met his gaze, unflinching, and raised his own glass, the weight of the wine heavier than before. To family, he echoed, the words tasting bitter. As the night deepened and shadows stretched across the walls, David knew that the evening was only the beginning. The stakes were rising, and he had to prepare for the storm that was brewing just beyond the horizon. The game was on, and he was determined to protect his daughter no matter the cost. With thoughts swirling like leaves caught in a tempest, David stepped out onto the porch, taking a moment to breathe in the cool night air. It was a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, a reminder that he had the strength to fight back, to shield Lisa from the darkness that threatened to envelop them. The stars twinkled above, distant yet bright, and as David stood there, he resolved to uncover Marcus's true intentions. The night was far from over, and he would not rest until he had safeguarded his family from the insidious dangers that lurked in the shadows. The room felt stifling as David stood at the sink, the sound of running water barely masking the chaos brewing in his mind. He stared into the sudsy dishwater, where remnants of dinner intertwined with the lingering scent of roasted chicken and herbs. The warmth of the kitchen, once a haven of comfort, had transformed into a battleground, each clink of the dishes reminding him of the stakes at hand. He could still feel the weight of Marcus's gaze, sharp and predatory, like a wolf sizing up its prey. "Dad, are you okay?" Lisa's voice floated in from the dining room, laced with concern. Her cheerful demeanor had been dimmed by the tension of the evening, and the innocence that typically radiated from her was now tinged with uncertainty. David turned off the faucet, taking a moment to collect himself. He had to keep the atmosphere light for Lisa's sake, but the thought of Marcus's intentions gnawed at him like a persistent itch. "I'm just cleaning up, sweetheart. I'll be there in a minute," he called back, forcing a smile that he hoped she couldn't see through. As he dried his hands on a dish towel, his thoughts drifted back to the moment he had switched the cups. The heavy red wine had swirled in Marcus's glass, glistening like a dangerous elixir, while David's heart raced in a mix of fear and defiance. He had seen the way Marcus's lips curled into a smug smile when he spoke of his investments, but behind that charm lay something darker. The memory of Marcus's veiled threats hung in the air like smoke, and David knew he had to tread carefully. "David, come on. You're missing the fun," Lisa called again, her voice breaking through his reverie. He could hear the clatter of silverware and the soft laughter that echoed from the dining room, a stark contrast to the tumult inside him. With a deep breath, he steeled himself and stepped back into the fray. The dining room was softly lit by the glow of a single chandelier, casting a warm light over the table set with mismatched plates and glasses. Lisa sat at the head, her smile a beacon of normalcy, while Marcus lounged next to her, his presence looming like a storm cloud. "Dad, you should join us for a toast," Marcus declared, raising his glass with a flourish that felt more like a challenge than a celebration. "To family and to new beginnings." David's heart raced as he caught a glimmer of something sharp in Marcus's eyes. The tension between them crackled in the air, and he could feel the weight of Lisa's gaze, innocent and unaware, as she mirrored her husband's gesture. "To family," David echoed, raising his glass with a steady hand. He could feel the cool glass against his palm, a reminder of the choice he had made moments before. He sipped cautiously, the rich taste of the wine filling his senses but offering no comfort. He studied Marcus over the rim of his glass, searching for cracks in the facade. "Delicious, isn't it?" Marcus leaned in, his voice conspiratorial. "I knew you'd appreciate a fine vintage. You have such discerning taste, David." "Thank you, Marcus," David replied, keeping his tone even. "I always believed that a good wine is like a good story. It reveals more with each sip." "Ah, a philosopher in our midst," Marcus laughed, but it rang hollow, like the echo of a distant thunderclap. "Perhaps we could share some stories after dinner? I've got a couple about my recent ventures that I think you'd find fascinating." David's stomach twisted. He could only imagine the stories that lay beneath Marcus's surface charm. "I'm sure they're enlightening," he said, his voice steady. "But I think I'd prefer to hear about your successes rather than your struggles." There was a flicker of annoyance in Marcus's eyes, quickly masked by a grin. "Always the cautious one, aren't you? But I assure you, David, my current situation is merely a minor setback. With a little investment, I can turn things around." Lisa chimed in, oblivious to the underlying tension. "Dad, Marcus has such great ideas. He's been working on this new project that could really take off. I mean, I believe in him. Of course you do, sweetheart, David said, forcing a smile. Confidence is key in any venture. He set his glass down, the clinking sound cutting through the atmosphere like a knife. Marcus's eyes narrowed, and the facade of charm slipped ever so slightly. Well, confidence doesn't pay the bills, does it? Sometimes, a little nudge in the right direction is all it takes. David felt a shiver run down his spine. The words hung heavy in the air, laden with unspoken threats. I'm not in a position to offer any nudges, Marcus, he replied, his voice steady but firm. I've spent my life teaching the value of prudence. Prudence, yes, Marcus replied, his voice low and smooth. But you know as well as I do that sometimes risks are necessary. If you don't take a chance, you might miss out on something spectacular. Or something catastrophic, David countered, his heart pounding as the conversation spiraled into dangerous territory. He glanced at Lisa, who was still blissfully unaware of the tension mounting between them. I've learned to be cautious over the years. It's kept me safe. Safe is boring, David. Marcus's voice rose slightly, and the joviality began to slip away, revealing an edge that was all too sharp. What's life without a little excitement? Besides, you're retired now. You should enjoy the fruits of your labor.
David met Marcus Case, unyielding.
And what if those fruits are poisoned, Marcus? The room fell silent, the weight of David's words hanging heavy in the air. Lisa's laughter faltered, and for a moment, the only sound was the faint tick of the clock on the wall, counting down the seconds of this fraught encounter. Dad, that's not what I meant, Lisa started, but Marcus waved her off. Relax, David. I'm just trying to help you see the potential, Marcus said, his voice now dangerously smooth, like ice gliding over steel. If you're not interested, that's perfectly fine, but you should at least consider the possibilities. Possibilities often come with consequences. David shot back, refusing to back down. He could feel the tension in the air, dense and palpable, and he knew that this was a battle not just for his own peace of mind, but for Lisa's safety as well. Consequences, yes, Marcus replied, his tone shifting ever so slightly, but they can also lead to opportunities. You wouldn't want to stifle Lisa's happiness, would you? David's breath hitched. The threat was implicit, woven into the fabric of Marcus's words. He couldn't allow fear to dictate his actions, but the stakes were higher than ever. I want what's best for my daughter, he said, his voice steady. And that includes keeping her away from people who might exploit her. Exploiting? Marcus scoffed, but the laughter didn't quite reach his eyes. You think I would harm Lisa? I love her. I'm only trying to provide for us, for our future. Your future, David challenged, his heart racing. Or just yours. The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa shifted in her seat, her eyes darting between the two men, her confusion palpable. Can we not fight? This is supposed to be a family dinner, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Of course, darling, Marcus said. An easy smile plastered on his face, but David could see the tension beneath. Let's not ruin the evening. I just want what's best for all of us. David clenched his jaw, the resolve hardening inside him. Then perhaps you should start by being honest. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud, thick with implications. He could feel the weight of Marcus's stare, a warning wrapped in charm, but David stood firm. This was not just about dinner anymore. It was a matter of trust, of safety. As the conversation shifted, David remained vigilant, determined to protect Lisa from the encroaching shadows. He would not allow Marcus to manipulate her any longer. The evening had turned into a chess game, each word a move on the board, and David was prepared to make his next play. The clatter of dishes resumed, and laughter filled the room once more. But underneath it all, the tension simmered, a constant reminder of the danger lurking at the table. David's heart beat fiercely in his chest, a silent promise echoing in his mind. He would uncover the truth, and he would keep Lisa safe, no matter the cost. The clinking of silverware against porcelain rang through the dining room like an ominous echo, amplifying the tension that hung in the air. David sat across from Marcus, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest, every beat a reminder of the stakes at play. He had switched the cups, but the act felt like a single bead in a string of unresolved questions. What would Marcus do if he realized the wine had been altered? Would he retaliate? The very thought sent a chill creeping up David's spine. Lisa, blissfully unaware, continued to engage Marcus in light conversation, her laughter like a fleeting spark in an encroaching darkness. She reminisced about childhood memories, stories that had once brought warmth to David's heart, but now felt like a cruel juxtaposition to the reality before him. The sunlight streaming through the kitchen window had dimmed into a muted glow, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch ominously toward Marcus, whose smile remained fixed yet somehow hollow. "Do you remember the time we went camping by the lake?" Lisa's voice broke through David's thoughts, and he turned to see her bright blue eyes sparkling with nostalgia. "Dad, you almost set the tent on fire trying to cook hot dogs." David chuckled softly, the memory surfacing like a buoy in turbulent waters. "If I recall correctly, it was your idea to roast marshmallows over open flames," he said, allowing himself a moment of levity. "I was merely following orders." As Lisa laughed, David's gaze flickered back to Marcus, who was watching him with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Marcus's lips curved into a condescending smile, but his eyes were predatory, like a wolf assessing its prey. The jarring contrast between Lisa's warmth and Marcus's cold calculation sent a ripple of unease through David. "Those were good times," Marcus said, his voice resonating with a false sincerity. "It's nice to see a father who cares so much about his daughter. Family is everything, isn't it?" His words dripped with irony, and David felt a surge of irritation. He could almost hear the unspoken challenge in Marcus's tone. "What are you willing to do to protect her?" "Of course," David replied, keeping his voice steady despite the tempest of emotions swirling within him. "Family is the most important thing we have." He met Marcus's gaze head-on, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "But sometimes, it's hard to tell who truly has your best interests at heart." The atmosphere shifted, thickening under the tension, as Lisa looked between her father and her husband, sensing the undercurrent of discord that had crept into the conversation. "Dad, don't be silly. We're all family here." She reached across the table, placing a hand on David's arm, her touch grounding him amidst the storm. "Absolutely, Lisa," Marcus interjected, his voice a hair too loud, the false joviality barely masking the menace beneath. "David, it's all about trust, isn't it? You have to trust that the people you care about will always look out for you." The subtle emphasis on trust sent a shiver down David's spine. "Trust is a fragile thing," David countered, the words escaping his lips before he could second-guess himself. "It can be broken in an instant." He could feel the tension crackling like electricity in the air, and he knew he was treading on dangerous ground. Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms as he regarded David with a mixture of amusement and annoyance. "You really think you know everything, don't you, David? You've always been the wise one, the teacher. But life isn't so black and white." There was a dark edge to his tone that made David's stomach churn. The moment hung suspended, a fragile balance of power, until Lisa's laughter broke through again, light and airy. "Let's not get too serious. How about we play a game after dinner? Something fun." Her enthusiasm was infectious, a reminder of the joy that once filled their home. Yet, David felt an overwhelming urge to protect that joy, to shield it from the storm that was Marcus. "Games sound good." David forced a smile, though his heart raced. What do you have in mind? I was thinking charades, Lisa said, her eyes alight with excitement. It'll be hilarious. Dad, you're terrible at acting, but I bet you'll surprise us all. Or not, David replied, a half-smile breaking through his apprehension. I suppose I could give it a shot. As Lisa's laughter danced around them, David's mind was far from the prospect of games. He couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus was playing a much darker game, one with high stakes and hidden motives. His instincts screamed that he needed to dig deeper, to uncover the truth behind Marcus's charm. Speaking of games, Marcus said, cutting into their playful banter, I've been thinking about some investment opportunities that could benefit us all. I'd love to get your thoughts, David. His voice dripped with insincerity, and David felt a wave of dread wash over him. Investment opportunities? David echoed, struggling to keep his tone neutral. What kind of opportunities? Oh, the usual real estate stocks. There's a lot of money to be made if you're willing to take a risk. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, as if he were trying to pierce through David's calm demeanor. Money isn't everything, Marcus, David said, his voice firm. Sometimes the cost is too high. Marcus chuckled, though it sounded more like a growl. You're a cautious man, David, but sometimes you have to seize the moment. Life is too short to play it safe, or too short to make foolish decisions. David shot back, his patience thinning. There was a fire in his chest now, fueled by the need to protect Lisa, to shield her from the dark intentions that lurked beneath Marcus's charming facade. Lisa's laughter faltered, an uneasy silence settling over the table. She glanced between them, concern knitting her brow. Dad, can we not talk about business at dinner? It's supposed to be family time. Marcus waved her off with a dismissive gesture. Of course, Lisa. Just a friendly discussion, he said, though the smirk on his face suggested otherwise. David's heart raced as he considered his next move. He had to protect Lisa, but how far was he willing to go? The wine glasses remained between them, the one he had switched now filled with a subtle poison, a safeguard against the lurking threat. Would he need it? As they finished dinner, the unease lingered, palpable like a thick fog. David's mind raced with possibilities. He needed to find a way to confront Marcus without endangering Lisa. Perhaps he could gather evidence, something to expose Marcus's true nature. He could not shake the feeling that the man was more than just a charming husband. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Let's clean up, Lisa said cheerfully, rising to gather the plates. Allow me, David offered, rising from his seat, eager to distract himself from the gnawing anxiety. As he stepped into the kitchen, he could hear Marcus's voice trailing behind him, a low, menacing whisper. Just remember, David, trust is a double-edged sword. Cut too deep, and it might just sever the ties that bind. David clenched his fists, swallowing hard. He would not let Marcus's words intimidate him. He had to remain vigilant, to guard against the threat that loomed over his family. As he rinsed the dishes under the warm water, he felt the weight of his resolve harden. He would protect Lisa at all costs, even if it meant stepping into the darkness himself. The shadows in the kitchen deepened, mirroring the growing tension in his heart. He would find a way to uncover Marcus's secrets, to expose the truth lurking beneath the surface. The evening was far from over, and the real game was just beginning. The clinking of silverware echoed in the dimly lit dining room, a stark contrast to the palpable silence that hung in the air. David glanced at Lisa, who was obliviously slicing her chicken, her cheerful chatter filling the void that Marcus had opened with his heavy-handed suggestions. The tension between father and son-in-law felt like a taut string, ready to snap at any moment. David's heart raced, an instinctual response to the predator seated across the table from him. Dad, you should really consider my investment idea, Marcus said, leaning forward, his voice smooth, yet laced with an undercurrent of intimidation that prickled the hair on the back of David's neck. It's a sure thing. You wouldn't want to miss out on a chance to grow your savings, especially with the way the market is going. David met Marcus's gaze, which resembled that of a wolf sizing up its prey. There was something unsettlingly hollow in those dark eyes that made David's skin crawl. I appreciate the advice, Marcus, but I prefer to keep my finances simple. He forced a smile, but it felt like a mask over his growing discomfort. Lisa, sensing the shift in ambience, chimed in. Oh, come on, Dad. You always said you wanted to be more adventurous. Why not give it a shot? Her laughter was light, like the tinkling of wind chimes, but it only served to deepen the chasm of worry in David's heart. Adventure isn't always a good thing, Lisa, he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. Sometimes, it's better to play it safe. With that, he took a sip from the glass he had switched with Marcus earlier, the rich, velvety Merlot washing over his tongue. A small comfort amid the brewing storm. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a brief moment, David felt he had struck a nerve. Safe can be boring, Dad, he countered, a hint of menace creeping into his tone. You wouldn't want to be seen as stagnant, would you? Life is about risk. You taught Lisa that, didn't you? The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and suffocating. David's mind raced. He had indeed taught Lisa about taking chances, about seizing opportunities. But this was different. This was not a leap into the unknown. This was a plunge into darkness, a gamble stacked against him. The stakes were higher than Marcus realized. Life is also about making wise choices, Marcus, David replied, his voice measured, though he felt the tightness in his chest as he held back the urge to confront his son-in-law directly. He needed to remain calm, to keep the evening from spiraling into chaos. Lisa, attempting to defuse the tension, changed the subject. How about we play a game after dinner? Something fun. Her enthusiasm was infectious, a bright light cutting through the shadows that loomed between the men. Marcus's expression softened, but David could see the flicker of annoyance behind it. Sure, why not? He said, though his tone suggested that he was more interested in keeping Lisa happy than in participating. What do you have in mind? As Lisa excitedly rattled off options, David felt his resolve solidify. He would not allow Marcus to manipulate this situation further. He had to find a way to protect Lisa, perhaps even gather evidence of Marcus's true nature. But how? The thought of confronting Marcus directly sent a wave of dread coursing through him. The man was a master of charm, and David knew he had to tread carefully. After dinner, Lisa cleared the table while David and Marcus lingered in the dining room, the air thick with unspoken words. David busied himself with the remnants of the meal, pretending to wipe down the table as he listened to Marcus's casual remarks about the weather, each word laced with a tension that made David's stomach churn. Your daughter is something special, Marcus said, his voice deceptively soft. You've raised her well. Thank you, David replied, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. She deserves the best. Oh, she does, Marcus agreed, leaning back in his chair, his posture relaxed yet predatory. That's why I want to ensure she has a secure future. You understand, don't you? David's eyes narrowed. What do you mean by secure future? He asked, his voice low and steady, the weight of the question hanging heavily between them. Marcus's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. You know, with the right investments, we could all be living a much more comfortable life. It's all about the right choices, just like you taught Lisa. David felt the heat rise within him, the protective instinct surging to the forefront. And what choices are those, Marcus? Choices that involve taking advantage of my daughter and her inheritance. The tension crackled in the air, and for a moment, the two men faced off, each sizing the other up. David could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, urging him to take action. But before he could respond, Lisa returned, her arms laden with dishes, breaking the momentary standoff. Everything okay? she asked, her brow furrowed with concern as she glanced between her father and husband. Just discussing investments, Marcus replied, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Your dad was just giving me some insight on how to handle finances. David forced a smile, the corners of his mouth twitching against his better judgment. Just trying to share some wisdom, Lisa. You know how I like to keep things simple. Right? She said, eyes darting between the two men as if sensing the tension but unable to name it. Well, let's play a game. I'll grab the cards. As Lisa left the room, David took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. The game would be a distraction, a way to keep Marcus occupied while he formulated a plan. He needed to act, but he had to do so carefully. Your daughter has a good heart, Marcus said, his tone almost casual, yet David could sense the underlying threat. You should be proud of her. I am, David replied, his voice steady, though the weight of Marcus's words hung heavily in the air. But I'm also protective of her. I won't let anyone take advantage of her goodness. Marcus chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. You may want to reconsider your approach, David. Sometimes the people closest to us can be the most dangerous. Before David could respond, Lisa returned, her arms full of cards. I've got the game. Let's lighten the mood. As she set the cards on the table, David felt a renewed sense of determination. The evening might be filled with games and laughter, but he knew the battle was far from over. He would need to be vigilant, to watch every move Marcus made, and to protect his daughter from the shadows that threatened to engulf her. As the game commenced, David remained acutely aware of Marcus's every glance and gesture, each one a reminder of the danger lurking just beneath the surface. Laughter erupted between them, but David's heart was heavy with the knowledge that this facade could shatter at any moment. In that moment, he made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth about Marcus, no matter the cost. If it meant digging deeper into the darkness, then so be it. Lisa's safety was worth any risk, and he was ready to confront whatever lay ahead. As the last remnants of daylight slipped away, shadows crept into the corners of the dining room, the atmosphere thick with unspoken words and hidden intentions. David sat in silence, the cool glass of wine resting in his hands, its crimson hue reflecting the dim light overhead. His heart raced, each beat echoing the tension that wrapped around the room like a tightening noose. Opposite him, Marcus leaned back in his chair, a veneer of ease covering the storm brewing beneath the surface. David, Marcus began, his voice smooth yet edged with impatience. I think you're making a grave mistake by not considering my proposal seriously. The investment I mentioned could change everything for you and Lisa. You've worked hard all your life. It's time you let someone else's expertise guide you. He leaned forward, his smile a calculated mask, eyes glinting like shards of ice. David's throat tightened, the urge to respond battling against the dread that coiled within him. The echoes of Marcus's earlier words played in his mind, a reminder that this man was not only a stranger, but a potential threat to everything he held dear. I appreciate your concern, Marcus, he replied, his voice steady. But I prefer to manage my own finances. I've always believed in using caution, especially when it comes to investments. Caution, huh? Marcus chuckled, the sound grating against David's nerves. You know, David, sometimes caution can lead to stagnation. You don't want to get left behind while the world moves forward. He gestured with his glass, the red liquid swirling ominously. You need to embrace risk to reap rewards. Lisa, oblivious to the undercurrents of danger, filled the silence with a bright laugh. Oh, come on, Dad. Marcus is just trying to help you. You've always played it too safe. A little excitement wouldn't hurt. She reached across the table, patting Marcus's hand, her eyes sparkling with affection. David felt a pang of frustration as he watched the exchange. Lisa's innocence was a stark contrast to the dark cloud that hovered over Marcus. He could sense the predator lurking beneath the surface, and the thought made his skin crawl. I appreciate your enthusiasm, Lisa, but Dad, Marcus interrupted, his voice rising with an intensity that made David's heart skip. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about Lisa's future too. You don't want to leave her with nothing when you're gone, do you? The words hung in the air, a thinly veiled threat that sent a chill coursing through David's veins. Marcus, David replied, his voice low but firm. I'm not going to let you bully me into a decision I'm not comfortable with. His grip on the wine glass tightened, knuckles whitening as he fought to maintain his composure. The tension in the room thickened, the air heavy with unspoken animosity. Lisa sensed the shift, her brow furrowing in confusion. What's going on? Why does it feel like we're all on edge right now? She looked from David to Marcus, her innocence a stark reminder of what was at stake. Nothing's wrong, sweetheart, Marcus said too quickly, his smile slipping just a fraction. Just a little disagreement between men. Nothing to worry your pretty head about. He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing against hers in a gesture that felt more possessive than affectionate. David's stomach churned. He could see the way Marcus's grip tightened around Lisa, and the protective instinct within him flared. I think it's time we have a real conversation, Marcus, about your intentions, about what you really want. The words escaped him before he could think them through, but it was too late to retract. David, Marcus said, his tone shifting to one of mock concern. You're being dramatic. I'm just looking out for my family. Your family. He leaned back, folding his arms, the facade of charm slipping further into something darker. But if you're not interested in being part of the solution, then maybe you should step back and let the adults talk. Adults? David echoed, his voice rising in defiance. You're not acting like an adult, Marcus. You're acting like a child throwing a tantrum because you aren't getting your way. He felt a surge of adrenaline, the heat of righteous anger fueling his resolve. I won't stand by and let you manipulate my daughter. Lisa's eyes darted between the two men, concern etched across her features. Dad, please. This isn't helping anything, she pleaded, her voice soft yet insistent. Can't we just enjoy dinner? Enjoy dinner? David scoffed, shaking his head. How can I enjoy dinner when I'm watching my daughter's future being toyed with like a game? He turned to Lisa, desperation spilling into his tone. You need to see who Marcus really is, Lisa. He's not the man you think he is. Enough! Marcus's voice boomed, cutting through the tension like a knife. You should be grateful I'm here to help you both. I don't need to explain myself to you, David. Your time is running out, and you're going to wish you had listened to me. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor, the sound jarring in the charged atmosphere. Marcus, sit down, David commanded, his own voice steady despite the turmoil inside. You're not going to intimidate me. For a moment, they locked eyes, and David felt the weight of the threat in Marcus's gaze. It was a look that promised retribution, a wolf sizing up its prey. He couldn't show fear, not now, not when everything depended on him standing firm. Fine, Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. But remember this moment, David. You can't protect Lisa forever. The world is full of wolves, and you're not as strong as you think. With that, he turned away, retreating to the kitchen with a heavy step, leaving an oppressive silence in his wake. David exhaled slowly, tension releasing just a fraction as he turned to Lisa, who looked small and fragile. Sweetheart, I don't understand, Dad, she interrupted, her voice trembling. Marcus loves me. Why can't you see that? Because love shouldn't feel like a threat, David said softly, leaning closer to her. I'm not trying to come between you two. I just want you to be safe. Money can change people, Lisa. It can twist their hearts and turn them into something unrecognizable. Tears glistened in her eyes as she shook her head. You don't know him like I do. He's just trying to secure our future. She paused, her voice wavering. "Why can't you trust me?" "I do trust you," David replied, his heart aching at the pain in her voice. "But I can't trust him. I've seen too much, and I can't ignore the signs." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of his experiences and fears. Just then, Marcus returned, a bottle of wine in hand. The cork popped with a flourish. "What's going on here?" "Having a heart-to-heart." He poured himself another glass, his demeanor now deceptively casual, as if the earlier confrontation had never happened. "Just discussing the future," David said, refusing to let Marcus's presence intimidate him. "Something you seem to have a vested interest in, don't you?" "Of course," Marcus replied, a predatory glint in his eye. "I care about my family. It's all about securing the best for the ones we love." The words dripped with insincerity, each syllable a reminder of the facade Marcus wore like armor. David shifted in his seat, the air growing thick with unspoken hostility. The evening had turned into a battleground, and he felt cornered. But he refused to back down. He had already switched the cups. Now he needed to be the voice of reason, the protector his daughter needed. As Marcus continued to speak, David's mind raced, plotting his next move. He needed evidence, a way to expose Marcus for who he truly was. The fear gnawed at him, but beneath it, a flicker of determination ignited. He would not let his daughter fall victim to Marcus's charm. He had to act, and soon. The evening stretched on, filled with strained laughter and forced smiles. But beneath the surface, a storm brewed, and David knew the time for action was drawing near. The shadows in the room deepened, mirroring the shadows encroaching on their lives. And as the last light faded, David vowed silently to protect his daughter at any cost. The tension in the room thickened like the smoke swirling from the candle flames, casting flickering shadows against the walls. David's heart drummed steadily in his chest, a persistent reminder of the stakes at play. He remained seated, hands clasped around the cool stem of his wine glass, now filled with the deep red liquid that could either soothe or betray him. Across the table, Marcus leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. The charm that had once captivated Lisa now felt like a mask, concealing something more sinister beneath the surface. "You know, David," Marcus began, his voice dripping with false congeniality, "I really think you're doing yourself a disservice by not considering my proposal. Think of the future. Think of Lisa." David's gaze flicked to his daughter, who sat blissfully unaware of the undercurrents swirling between the two men. Lisa's bright eyes sparkled with affection as she beamed at Marcus, her laughter ringing out like delicate chimes. It was a stark contrast to the storm brewing in David's chest. He longed to shield her from the darkness he had sensed in Marcus, yet words felt like stones lodged in his throat. "Lisa's future is exactly what I'm concerned about," David replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "I want her to have stability, not whatever it is you're offering." Marcus leaned forward, his expression shifting, the playful demeanor replaced with something colder. "Stability? You think keeping her in this little house is stability? You're holding her back, David. She deserves more than this quaint lifestyle." Each word dripped with condescension, a subtle threat layered beneath the polished exterior. David's jaw clenched, and he fought against the anger that threatened to bubble over. "It's not about material wealth, Marcus. It's about integrity, about family. You wouldn't understand that." The smile on Marcus's face faltered for a brief moment, revealing the wolf lurking beneath the sheep's clothing. "Integrity doesn't pay the bills, old man. I've been trying to help you see the bigger picture." His voice dropped to a conspiratorial tone, almost a whisper. "You don't want to make an enemy of me." The warning hung in the air, palpable and suffocating. David's mind raced, recalling the conversations he had had with friends over the years about Marcus's gambling debts, his flippant attitude towards responsibility. To threaten him was to threaten Lisa, and David would not allow that. He straightened his back, the resolve hardening within him. "You won't intimidate me, Marcus. I know what you're after." Lisa, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, looked back and forth between the two men, confusion etched on her face. "Dad? What's going on?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. David turned to her, his heart aching at the worry in her eyes. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just a discussion about priorities." He attempted a reassuring smile, but it felt hollow even to him. Marcus seized the opening, shifting gears with practiced ease. "Just trying to show your father how much better life can be with a little ambition. Lisa, sometimes people need a push to realize their potential." David's stomach twisted at Marcus's words, realizing the double meaning laced within them. "Ambition isn't everything, Marcus. Sometimes it leads to ruin. Just look at your own life." Marcus's eyes narrowed, but he quickly masked his irritation with a laugh that echoed too loudly in the tense atmosphere. "Touché, David. But I'm not the one who's living in the past, clinging to some romantic notion of integrity. The world has changed, my friend. It's time you did too." The candlelight flickered again, casting a dim glow over the table as David's thoughts spiraled into a whirlwind of anxiety. He could feel the threat mounting, like dark clouds gathering before a storm, and the weight of his previous actions pressed heavily on his conscience. He had switched the cups, but would it be enough to protect himself and Lisa from the depths of Marcus's greed? "Why don't we take a break from discussing business?" Lisa suggested, her voice a soothing balm amid the tension. "Let's enjoy dinner before it gets cold." She stood, reaching for the serving dish filled with roasted vegetables, attempting to break the atmosphere that had grown so heavy. David watched her, admiration and sorrow warring within him. Lisa was an island of light in an encroaching darkness, and he was determined to keep her safe. As she served herself, Marcus's gaze lingered on her, calculating and hungry, like a predator eyeing its prey. "That's a wonderful idea, dear," Marcus said, his voice dripping with feigned warmth. "Family dinners are all about enjoying each other's company, after all." David clenched his fists beneath the table, his mind racing as he thought of the implications of Marcus's words. He had to act, and the time was running short. As Lisa chatted about her day, David's thoughts turned inward, the memories flooding him. He recalled the day he had first met Marcus, charming and charismatic, sweeping Lisa off her feet. David had been cautious then, his instincts warning him of the shadows lurking behind the young man's smile. But Lisa had been so enamored, her eyes shining with love and hope, that he had pushed his worries aside, hoping for the best. Now those worries loomed large, and he could no longer afford to ignore them. Marcus was not merely a son-in-law. He was a threat to everything David held dear. "How about a toast?" Marcus suggested suddenly, raising his glass with a flourish, his smile wide but his eyes dark. "To family and new beginnings." David swallowed hard. He felt the weight of the glass in his hand, the wine sloshing gently against the sides. He knew what was at stake, the precarious balance that hung in the air like the faint scent of burnt sugar. "To family," he echoed, his voice unwavering as he raised his glass, careful to keep his gaze locked on Marcus. Their glasses clinked together, the sound sharp and resonant, cutting through the tension like a knife. But as David took a sip, savoring the taste of the wine, his wine, he felt a flicker of hope. He was still in control, albeit by a thread, and he would not let Marcus's shadow consume him. The meal continued, laughter and light conversation threading through the dark clouds that loomed over the table. Yet David remained vigilant, watching Marcus closely, analyzing every shift in his demeanor. The man was a ticking clock, and David knew that if he didn't act soon, the consequences could be dire. As the evening wore on, David's resolve solidified. He had to confront Marcus, not just for himself but for Lisa. He would not allow her to be ensnared by the web of manipulation Marcus wove around them. "Marcus," David said, breaking the light-hearted chatter, his voice steady and resolute. "We need to talk." Lisa paused, her fork midway to her mouth, her expression shifting from confusion to concern. "Dad." Marcus's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly, leaning forward with a feigned interest that sent a chill down David's spine. "What's on your mind, David?" David took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words pressing upon him. "I need you to be honest with me. What are your intentions with Lisa? Are you in this for love? Or is it simply a means to an end?" The atmosphere shifted, a sudden stillness enveloping the room as both Lisa and Marcus froze, the tension palpable. David could feel the air crackle with the unspoken words hanging between them, the stakes rising higher with each passing second. Marcus held David's gaze, his expression a mask of calm, but the darkness lurking behind his eyes betrayed his true feelings. "Is that really how you see it, David? You think I would ever harm Lisa? I love her." David's heart sank at the lie, wrapped in the smoothness of Marcus's words. "Love shouldn't come with strings attached, Marcus. And I can't ignore the damage that could come from your ambitions." Lisa's voice broke through the tension, soft and pleading. "Dad, please, I don't want to hear this. Marcus loves me." David turned to her, desperation clawing at him. "Lisa, I'm trying to protect you. You don't see what he's capable of." "Capable of?" Marcus echoed, his tone rising, the charm slipping away to reveal the predator beneath. "You think you know me, David? You think you can protect her from me? You're just an old man clinging to outdated notions." The words struck David like a physical blow, igniting a fire within him. "And you're nothing but a fraud, a wolf in sheep's clothing." The air between them crackled with hostility, and David could see the flicker of anger in Marcus's eyes, the barely contained rage threatening to spill over. But he stood firm, refusing to back down. "Enough!" Lisa's voice rang out, high and pained, cutting through the tension like a knife. "This isn't helping anyone. Can't we just enjoy the evening as a family?" But the damage was done. The evening had transformed from a simple dinner into a battleground, and David could feel the weight of the impending storm. He had set the wheels in motion, and there was no turning back now. As they fell into silence, David glanced at Marcus, whose expression was unreadable, a storm brewing beneath the surface. The battle had only just begun, and David knew he had to remain vigilant. For Lisa's sake, he would fight no matter the cost. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the table, illuminating the path ahead. David felt a renewed sense of purpose coursing through him. He would protect Lisa from the threat that Marcus posed, even if it meant facing the very darkness that had seeped into their family's life. With that resolve, David steeled himself for the confrontation that lay ahead, ready to unearth the truth hidden beneath Marcus's charming facade. He would not allow fear to dictate the outcome, not when so much was at stake. The clinking of silverware echoed in the tense silence that enveloped the dining room, each sound sharp and jarring against the backdrop of David's racing thoughts. The dim light of the overhead chandelier cast flickering shadows that danced along the walls, creating an almost surreal atmosphere that heightened David's sense of unease. He could feel the weight of Marcus's gaze like a predator sizing up its prey, and despite the warmth of the room, a chill crept down his spine. "David, are you all right?" Lisa's voice broke through the fog of his contemplation, pulling him back from the precipice of his worries. Her brow was knitted with concern, her gentle eyes searching his face for answers. In that moment, she appeared so innocent, so blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface of their family dinner. "I'm fine, sweetheart," David replied, forcing a smile that felt like a brittle mask. "Just lost in thought, I suppose." His heart ached as he looked at her, wanting nothing more than to shield her from the dark intentions he sensed lurking in Marcus's heart. Across the table, Marcus leaned back in his chair, a sardonic smile playing on his lips. "Well, David, you're gonna have to snap out of it. We're having a delicious dinner, after all," he said, his tone dripping with a sweetness that felt overly saccharine, like a candy with a bitter core. "Let's not waste this fine wine." He raised his glass, the ruby liquid catching the light, and David's stomach twisted at the sight. "Quite right," David said, raising the glass he had switched earlier, forcing himself to take a sip. The wine was smooth and rich, a stark contrast to the tension that lay thick in the air. He could feel Marcus's eyes on him, studying him, waiting for any sign of weakness. "David, I've been thinking," Marcus continued, his voice now taking on a conspiratorial tone, as if inviting David into a secret club. "You know, I've got some great ideas for investments. I really believe we could make a killing if you'd just consider putting some money into my new venture." David's heart raced, but he maintained his outward composure. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, Marcus, but I'm not looking to invest in anything risky at this stage of my life. I've worked too hard to save what I have." "Risky?" Marcus scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "This is a golden opportunity. You're not just saving, you're sitting on a fortune that could be working for you. Think of the possibilities, David. You're wasting your potential." The words dripped like poison, each syllable a calculated move in the game Marcus was playing. David's pulse quickened as he sensed the manipulation threading through Marcus's argument, the way he twisted logic to suit his narrative. "And what makes you think this so-called venture is any different from the last one?" David countered, his voice steady despite the swell of anger rising within him. The smile faltered for only a brief moment on Marcus's face, but it was enough for David to recognize the flicker of irritation. "You have to take chances, old man. You can't hide behind your schoolteacher's desk forever. Think of Lisa. Think of your grandchildren. Don't you want to provide for them?" The mention of Lisa sent a surge of protectiveness coursing through David. He met Marcus's gaze, steady and unyielding, refusing to let the younger man's intimidation tactics sway him. "What I want is to ensure that my daughter is safe and secure, not embroiled in your schemes." Lisa, oblivious to the battle of wills unfolding before her, smiled brightly. "You two are always at it. It's like watching a game of chess. I think you should both lighten up. How about we toast to family?" She raised her glass again, her laughter tinkling like wind chimes, momentarily breaking the tension. "Sure, a toast," Marcus echoed, his voice sharp as a blade, but the smile on his face was forced, and David noted how his fingers tightened around the stem of his wine glass, knuckles turning white. "Here's to family," David said, lifting his glass, but the words felt heavy on his tongue, laden with unspoken warnings. "And to honesty." "Honesty," Marcus echoed, the word rolling off his tongue like a challenge. "Perhaps that's something we should all strive for." A silence fell over the table, thick and suffocating. David could feel the tension crackling like static in the air, a palpable energy that threatened to erupt at any moment. He stole a glance at Lisa, who was blissfully unaware of the dark undercurrents swirling around her. Her smile was bright, illuminating the dimness of the room, and for a moment, David felt a flicker of hope. Maybe if he could just keep her safe for a little longer, they could escape this nightmare. "Why don't we talk about something more pleasant?" Lisa suggested, her eyes darting between the two men, sensing the shift in the mood. "David, remember the summer we went to the lake? You caught that huge fish." The memory of that day was a balm to David's soul, the warmth of the sun on their backs and the laughter they shared by the water's edge. "Yes, I remember it well," he replied, his voice softening as he allowed himself to be swept away by nostalgia. "It was quite the adventure, wasn't it?" "Adventure," Marcus scoffed, his tone laced with disdain. "I'd hardly call fishing an adventure. It's a pastime for those who can't handle real excitement." David's jaw tightened, Excitement can take many forms, Marcus. Sometimes it's about the simple joys. Simple joys won't pay the bills, David. Marcus shot back, his patience wearing thin. You need to face reality. The world is moving forward, and you're stuck in the past. As Marcus's words hung in the air like a dark cloud, David felt the full weight of the tension in the room. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. And what reality is that, Marcus? The one where you manipulate your way into my family's life? Where you prey on the vulnerable? At this, Marcus leaned forward, his eyes glinting with a feral intensity that sent a shiver down David's spine. You're making a mistake, David. You don't want to be on the wrong side of this. I could make your life very uncomfortable. The threat lingered in the air, a dark specter that threatened to overshadow the warmth of the family gathering. David's heart pounded in his chest as he fought to keep his composure. He could feel the walls closing in, the air thick with danger. Enough, Lisa interjected, her voice firm and resolute. This is my home, and I won't have you two fighting like this. We're supposed to be a family, and families don't tear each other apart. David watched as she reached across the table, her hand resting gently on Marcus's arm. Please, let's just enjoy the evening. Can't we put aside our differences, just for tonight? Marcus hesitated, the fire in his eyes flickering as he looked at Lisa. Fine, he said, a forced smile returning to his face. For you, Lisa, I can play nice. David's heart sank at the insincerity in Marcus's tone, but he knew he had to tread carefully. The stakes were higher now than ever. He could not afford to lose Lisa to the very man who seemed hell-bent on tearing their family apart. As the evening wore on, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, but the underlying tension never fully dissipated. David remained vigilant, his mind racing with plans and contingencies. He needed to gather more evidence, something concrete that could expose Marcus for what he truly was. After dinner, as they moved to the living room, David felt the weight of his decision growing heavier. He could not ignore the threat Marcus posed any longer. With every smile and laugh Lisa shared with her husband, David felt the urgency of his mission pulse like a drumbeat in his veins. Hey, David, Marcus called from across the room, a hint of mockery in his voice. You still think I'm a wolf in sheep's clothing? David met his gaze, unwavering. I think you're a man with a hidden agenda. The smile that spread across Marcus's face was devoid of warmth. Then you'd best keep your eyes open, old man. As the night wore on, David plotted his next steps, determined to protect his daughter from the shadow that loomed over their family. The game had only just begun, but David was ready to play. He would uncover Marcus's true intentions and shield Lisa from the darkness that threatened to engulf them both. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but David's resolve was unshakable. He would not allow his daughter to be a pawn in Marcus's twisted game. With that thought, he steeled himself for the fight ahead, knowing that the stakes had never been higher. The tension in the room thickened like fog, enveloping David as he sat across from Marcus, who leaned back in his chair, a calculated smile plastered on his face. The clinking of cutlery and the soft hum of the refrigerator created an unsettling backdrop, amplifying the silence that had settled after their last heated exchange. David stole a glance at Lisa, who was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. She was chatting animatedly about her recent art project, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, a stark contrast to the shadows lurking in David's mind. Dad, did you hear what I said? Lisa's voice broke through David's reverie. He blinked, forcing himself to focus. Sorry, sweetheart. I must have zoned out for a moment. Marcus's gaze flicked to David, sharp and predatory, reminiscent of a wolf surveying its prey. Art is a wonderful outlet, Lisa, he said, his tone smooth yet laced with an undercurrent of condescension. But it won't pay the bills. You need to think about your future, especially with the market shifting like it is. David's heart raced at Marcus's veiled implication. The man had a talent for twisting words, making them sound innocent while hiding darker intentions beneath. "Art can be a viable career, Marcus," David interjected, his voice steadier than he felt. "It's not just about the money." Marcus leaned forward, elbows resting on the table, his expression shifting to one of mock sympathy. "Of course, David. But you know as well as I do that dreams don't pay for groceries or a mortgage. I'm just trying to help Lisa secure a stable future. That's all." "Help?" David's mind reeled. "Or control?" Lisa, oblivious to the tension, continued animatedly discussing her plans. "I want to create a series that explores our family history. I think it would be meaningful." There was a spark in her voice that made David's heart ache with both pride and dread. She deserved to follow her passions. But at what cost? Marcus nodded enthusiastically, but David could see the flicker of irritation in his eyes. "That sounds lovely, dear, but we have to be realistic. Maybe you could think about an art degree that has a business component." His words dripped with feigned encouragement, a thin veneer covering his true intentions. The clinking of silverware had grown louder, almost deafening. David fought the urge to push back against Marcus's influence. "What about the financial risks, Marcus? Your investments are perfectly sound," Marcus interrupted, his voice rising slightly, revealing a crack in his charming facade. "You just don't understand the potential. You've always been a teacher, David. You need to let go of your outdated notions about security." David's pulse quickened as Marcus's words hung heavy in the air, a challenge masquerading as advice. "And you've always been a salesman, Marcus. I'd be careful how you pitch your ideas." The atmosphere tensed further, and Lisa's eyes darted between the two men, sensing the shift but unable to grasp its depth. "Can we please just enjoy dinner? I'm starving." David took a steadying breath, attempting to temper the rising storm. "You're right, Lisa. Let's enjoy what we have." He gestured toward the half-empty plates, forcing a smile despite the unease gnawing at him. Marcus, ever the performer, plastered on a grin and raised his glass. "To family." The words rolled off his tongue with a sweetness that felt entirely insincere. "To family?" Lisa echoed, lifting her glass. David's heart sank as he watched Marcus's eyes gleam with a predatory satisfaction, as if he relished the control he wielded over them. As they resumed eating, David's thoughts whirled. He had to act, and he had to be smart. The night was still young, and the shadows were creeping closer. He needed to find a way to protect Lisa, to shield her from the subtle machinations of her husband. The conversation drifted to mundane topics, but David's mind was far from placid waters. He replayed the events of the evening, the moments of Marcus's subtle threats, the way he had tried to manipulate him into compliance. It was a dangerous game, and one that David could not afford to lose. Once dinner concluded, Lisa excused herself to clear the table, leaving David and Marcus alone in the dimly lit dining area. The flickering candlelight cast shadows that danced on the walls, mirroring the flickering unease within David. "David," Marcus began, his tone shifting to a more sinister undertone. "I think we need to have a serious conversation, just you and me." David forced himself to maintain eye contact, but he felt the weight of Marcus's gaze like a predator sizing up its prey. "What do you want to discuss?" he asked, keeping his voice level. "Your daughter's future. You see, I want what's best for her. I really do." Marcus leaned back, his smile widening, but David could see the threat lurking behind it. "But you have to understand, I have plans that require cooperation from you." David fought to keep his expression neutral. "What do you mean by cooperation?" Marcus's tone turned icy, like the sharpened edge of a knife glinting in the dark. "I need you to support my ventures. You have connections, resources, people who would listen to you. If you could just endorse my ideas, I promise it will lead to a better life for Lisa." "And if I refuse?" David's voice rose, an ember of defiance igniting within him. He had been too passive for too long. Marcus's smile faltered for a brief moment, revealing the menace that simmered beneath. I'd hate for anything to happen to your precious daughter. You know how the world works, David. Sometimes, to protect those we love, we have to make hard choices. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. David's heart raced, adrenaline coursing through his veins. You think you can intimidate me? I won't let you use me as a pawn in your twisted game. Marcus leaned forward, his voice a low whisper that sent chills down David's spine. You may not have a choice. If you truly care for Lisa, you'll think carefully about your next move. Remember, David, I'm not the only one who knows how to play the game. With that, Marcus straightened, flashing a disarming smile as Lisa returned, her arms laden with empty plates. The sudden shift in atmosphere was palpable, as if the air had been charged with electricity. Everything okay? She asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Of course, everything's fine, Marcus replied too quickly, his eyes darting toward David, a warning barely concealed. Isn't that right, David? David forced a smile, though it felt like a mask slipping over a face filled with turmoil. Absolutely. Just discussing plans for the future. Great. I'm so excited about all the possibilities, Lisa exclaimed, her enthusiasm a bright candle in the dimness of the room. David glanced at her, his heart aching. She was so full of life, so blissfully unaware of the danger lurking just beneath the surface. He had to protect her, even if it meant standing alone against Marcus's threats. As they resumed casual conversation, David felt the weight of his resolve hardening within him. He could no longer afford to be the passive observer. He had to act, to confront the darkness that threatened to consume his daughter's future. With each passing moment, the stakes rose higher, and David knew that the game was on. The question was not if he would fight, but how. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, a flicker of determination ignited within him. It was time to take a stand.